Merci, Nina. Thanks, Nina. Uh, First off, I want to begin by saying it's a great honor to be back here in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. I want to thank the workers and the union leaders that are standing behind me, and thank Mary Shortall, our candidate here in St. John's East. We're here to talk about the cost of grocery prices. And for a lot of Canadians, it is becoming really, really hard. We've got a store behind us, and we know that Dominion, Loblaws, Metro, and Sobeys, these large corporate grocery stores have made record profits. Not just any old profits, but record profits. They're making more money than they've ever made before. Just in last year alone, 2022, the combined profits of Metro, Loblaws, and Sobeys was over $3 billion. While making that type of record profit, they can't even afford to pay their workers a decent wage. And I remember when the Dominion workers were on strike demanding fairness. And right now, Metro workers in the GTA are demanding fairness. These are workers working for companies posting record profits that aren't even able to shop in their own stores that they work at. On top of that, Canadians are struggling week in, week out to try to buy their groceries. They go in to buy groceries that they could afford one week. They go in the next week and it's even more and they can't afford it. People are putting items back on the shelf, items that they used to be able to afford, and they're putting it back on their shelf. I can't imagine how families are coping with not only the cost of grocery prices going up, but on top of that, the price of everything going up. And what makes it all so much worse is that we've got these corporate grocery stores that are posting record profits. They're gouging Canadians. They're making more money than ever before while Canadians can't afford to buy their groceries. So we're saying enough's enough. Workers are saying enough's enough. We need to stop letting these grocery stores continue to gouge Canadians. We've seen 8 years of Justin Trudeau, and he has not stood up to the corporate greed of these CEOs that are jacking up the prices of their food while people are struggling. And we know this is a fact because we called on the Competition Bureau to investigate, and they found conclusively that the profit margins are going up for these large corporate grocery stores. So that means they are absolutely gouging Canadians while they're struggling, while they're already down. So we're calling for an end to this gouging of Canadians, an end to the free ride of these corporate grocery stores, making sure they pay their workers a fair share, a fair salary, but also making sure the prices are fair as well. So the three things we're proposing. First of all, I should say, not only do the Liberals not do enough on this, and they're not even willing to mention corporate greed, the Conservatives are not willing to tackle corporate greed. They're not going to do anything to take on the high price of groceries. They're not willing to call out the greed of these CEOs. They're not going to take on these corporations, but we are. We've got a three-part plan. First of all, we've got to increase the competition. 3 large corporations own the vast majority of grocery stores in our country, and that means it is harder to get fair prices. So we need to increase more competition, particularly independent and local grocery stores. Secondly, we need to stop the free ride. We need stiffer and bigger penalties for price fixing. That's happened in Canada when it comes to bread. We need stiffer penalties to discourage that. We need more transparency and stiffer penalties for any sort of consumer abuse. And finally, we need to put in place a tax on excess profits. On those excess profits, we need to tax these companies and use that revenue to give people a break, to allow them to have some relief so they can afford their groceries. Things like doubling the GST rebate, which we've already done, and other measures like it that put more money in people's pockets. We've got to stand up for workers right now. We've got to stand up for families that are saying, how do we afford our groceries? This is a serious problem. This is a serious problem. We got to take on the grocery prices that are so high and make sure people can afford it. Je veux dire clairement que c'est une situation difficile pour les familles. On est dans une situation où les prix des épiceries sont tellement hauts en même temps que les entreprises des épiceries font des profits records. Et on sait que les libéraux n'ont pas le courage d'agir, ils n'ont pas le courage de faire quelque chose pour réduire cette inégalité. Et les conservateurs non plus, ils ne sont pas prêts pour faire face à cette crise. Ils ne sont pas prêts, ils n'ont pas le courage de régler les grands profits de ces entreprises et arrêter l'exploitation. Donc, ce qu'on propose, c'est on doit mettre fin à cette exploitation, on doit augmenter la compétition, on doit avoir des amendes pour les entreprises qui fixent les prix et finalement, on doit mettre en œuvre une taxe sur les profits excessifs de ces entreprises et utiliser cette revenu pour réduire l'impact sur les familles pour mettre plus d'argent dans la poche. On peut faire ça, on a le courage de faire ça, c'est exactement ce que les néo-démocrates vont faire. On doit aussi assurer que les travailleurs dans ces entreprises ont des salaires, ont des bons salaires pour rejoindre les deux buts. Merci. With that, I'm ready for any questions you might have.
We'll begin with questions on site here, and the first question comes from David Felton.
Mr. Singh, I apologize for that idiot roll by there. Some of that might have been, could you repeat those 3 points again?
Sure.
Just because we don't want to use that whole areas again.
Yeah, no problem. Maybe I'll take a pause if anything goes on. If not, I'll say it straight. Hey, listen, if you're homophobic, keep it to yourself. Your homophobia is very inappropriate. It's very inappropriate. You're driving away and causing an accident. I'm right here. You can have a conversation if you like.
Yeah, we could sorry about
Sure.
that. You could
Sure.
repeat the 3 points.
Yeah. So what we need to do is, when it comes to the cost of groceries, there's 3 things we can do. One is we need to increase competition. We had the Competition Bureau look at what's going on. They say absolutely there's an increase in profit margins, that these large corporate grocery stores are increasing margins, making more profit off Canadians. So we need to put in place more competition. We want to favor local and independent grocery stores, but we need more competition. There's no doubt. 3 of the largest corporations own the vast majority of grocery stores in our country. Secondly, we need to have more penalties for companies that do things like price fixing, that gouge Canadians. We need to make sure that there's better penalties in place, stronger and stiffer penalties for companies that are abusing consumer rights. And finally, we need to make sure that when it comes to these large companies that we put in place that are making excess profits, we put in place an excess profit tax on the companies that are making excess profits, and use that revenue to give people a break, to do things like increasing the GST rebate that we doubled, looking at other means to put money back in people's pockets. But we've got to give people some real relief and make sure we take on the corporate greed of these companies.
Just to follow up, a lot of people are speculating there may be a federal election on the way. We've got Ms. Shortall here in place, and you're here sort of feels like a bit of a campaign kind of stop. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so we're really excited with our candidate. Mary Shortall, as folks know, is a longtime fighter for people in across the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. She's the past president of the Federation of Labor, and so has been a representative for workers, is someone who's going to be an incredible champion for the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. And for a long time, I've heard from people that they haven't had that voice in Parliament fighting for them, standing up and saying what the government's doing is wrong. And I put to the people of Newfoundland and Labrador, we need a new Democrat representing St. John East again, someone that's going to fight for you. And if you elect enough of us, we can actually be the ones calling the shots, and not just bringing in dental care and bringing in a doubling of the GC rebate, but making decisions every day that help workers, that lift up families.
Next question comes from Gerald with the CBC.
Yeah.
Hi, I wanted to ask you, so obviously, as you've been saying, grocery prices are high across the country and across the board in this province as well. But people in northern communities in Labrador, they're especially high at grocery stores there. So what do you think needs to happen to specifically address high grocery prices in northern communities and specifically Labrador?
So I want to acknowledge that there are communities that are harder hit, that more remote communities, more rural communities, and often communities that are in the far north are harder impacted by the cost of living in general, and particularly with the cost of grocery prices. So what we're proposing, the measures we're proposing to bring in more competition, to bring in more relief for workers, to put in better penalties when there is price fixing or any sort of consumer abuse, these are measures that are going to help people in the north, absolutely. In addition, we need to look at better ways to make sure that people in the north have access to affordable food, looking at ways to make sure that the government can provide the right supports to get people in the north to have access to those foods. The existing programs, people have been very critical. There's been a lot of subsidies for the companies, and those subsidies for the companies don't actually benefit the people. We've got to find a better way to ensure that the people are actually getting access to food that's affordable.
I wanted to ask you about what just happened. Someone came by yelling some extremely abusive remarks. How do you deal with something like that when it happens?
Well, one thing is, someone driving by and yelling something, obviously not interested in having a conversation. If they want to have a conversation, I'm always open to chatting with people. But driving by and yelling is, I think, an example of something maybe in their own life that they're dealing with, that they're expressing that in a way that's not really effective or helpful. But I got to say, I've spent a lot of time now in Newfoundland and Labrador. I was at the George Street Festival last night. I was meeting with workers, meeting with people. and I've had an incredible reception, and people have been very warm. And so, one-off someone yelling something is not something that's going to disturb me. I'm worried though about the climate where people are not willing to have a conversation, but are so upset they just want to yell and scream. Where there's legitimate frustrations with the cost of living, with the cost of rent, the cost of mortgage, I want to acknowledge that type of anger is real and important. Someone driving by and yelling something, not willing to have a conversation is a separate matter, I think.
Okay, our next question comes from VOCM.
Hi.
Yeah.
You mentioned the rising cost of living. One of the things that I think has been impacting people recently is, of course, the new federal fuel tax. I just wanted to get your opinion on this new tax, which seems to be disproportionately affecting people in Atlantic Canada due to the price of shipping goods.
Well, a couple of things that in terms of the price on fuel, one of the things that we're looking at is the fact that in Newfoundland and Labrador in particular, a lot of Canadians or a lot of people in this region rely on those type of fuels for heating their homes. So one of the proposals that we have to reduce some of the pressure, to give people some relief, is to end or to stop charging GST or HST on home heating. That's something that I think would make a lot of sense. It's something New Democrats have ran on in the past. Jack Layton actually first introduced this idea. We believe it would be something that would give immediate relief. It would provide real supports to those who are right now unable to find any other alternative. In addition, we want to provide more supports for people so they can have access to grants if they want to upgrade their heating or find a way to find an alternative that's more affordable to heat their homes. Right now, a lot of people don't have the means to do that. It's so costly. It's something that's cost prohibitive. So if we could provide a program that would give people easier access so they could actually upgrade their heating and move to something that's more affordable, that would help them in the long run bring down their costs, that might be a good alternative. So that's what we're looking at as well. Thanks.
Did you have a follow, Noah?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. We'll turn it over to questions on the Zoom.
Sure.
Alors, j'ai une première question de Valérie Gamache avec Radio-Canada. Valérie, c'est à toi.
Bonjour, Monsieur Singh. J'aimerais vous entendre sur le fait que hier, vous avez nommé une candidate. Vous faites aujourd'hui en quelque sorte des promesses. On vous sent en mode électoral. Est-ce que vous êtes prêt à mettre fin à votre entente avec les libéraux dès l'automne? Et quel serait le point de non-retour pour vous?
Donc, on est prêt toujours d'être dans une élection si c'est jamais le cas, mais ce n'est pas notre but. Notre but, c'est de forcer ce gouvernement de livrer l'aide aux gens, de mettre en œuvre les soins dentaires, de mettre en œuvre des assurances médicaments universelles, de mettre en œuvre des programmes pour construire plus de logements abordables. Donc, notre but, c'est de forcer ce gouvernement d'agir et de travailler pour les gens. On est toujours prêt pour une élection parce qu'on est dans un gouvernement minoritaire, mais jusqu'à ce moment, notre entente fonctionne. Et si le gouvernement brise ses promesses et le gouvernement n'est pas prêt à continuer de travailler pour les gens, on a des options et c'est toujours là.
Il y a quelques minutes, vous vous êtes fait interpeller. La semaine dernière, il y a 2 semaines, en fait, M. Trudeau également s'est fait déranger lors d'une activité publique. Est-ce que vous avez l'impression qu'actuellement, le climat social se dégrade et est-ce que ça vous inquiète en vue de la prochaine élection, ça?
Donc, en général, je dois dire, je n'ai pas de sécurité. Donc, quand je me promène dans les rues, quand j'ai des événements, souvent, pour la plupart, je n'ai aucune sécurité avec moi et j'ai des interactions tellement positives, un acquis positif, pas seulement ici à Nouvelle-Terre et Labrador, mais à travers les pays. Donc, ce sont des moments rares, mais ce que je trouve que quand ces moments rares se passent, il y a une agression et une tension qui est différente que dans le passé. Ça, c'est vrai. Et ça m'inquiète un peu parce que, pas pour moi personnellement, mais pour les autres qui veulent s'impliquer dans la vie politique, j'ai peur que ça va peut-être décourager les gens de plonger dans la vie politique et de participer. Ça, c'est une inquiétude pour moi. Mais en général, je dois dire, que je reçois un accueil tellement positif à travers le pays, avec les gens qui sont vraiment chaleureux et on a des discussions, des conversations extrêmement positives.
We will go to our next question. Zhao Li with City News National. Please go ahead.
Hi, thanks for taking my questions. This is kind of related to the election speculation question that you were asked earlier, Mr. Singh. Are you targeting Liberal seats on the East Coast?
We want to win all seats across the country. We want to win seats because we want to form government. And the reason why I want to do that is we've seen in 2 minority governments in a row the difference that we've had directly in the lives of people. In the pandemic, we can confidently say that every single measure that has helped out people in that time was either something we proposed and forced the government to do or something that we improved on. And people were better off because of it. And now in this minority government, we've got an agreement that's going to deliver dental care. It's going to deliver more supports for workers, that has already doubled the GST rebate, that made childcare funding permanent and prioritizing not-for-profit and public spaces. So we're making a real difference, but it's not enough for me to just push government. I want to be the one calling the shots and make sure the decisions are made in the interest of working people. So that's what we're running for. We're running to form the next government. I want to be the next prime minister. I want Mary Shortall here in St. John East to not just be a member of parliament with the New Democratic Party, but to be a member of the government where we're governing and making decisions for working people.
In respect, though, I mean, this is a seat that the NDP previously held, and on your most recent stops, you were in Toronto Danforth and Northwest Territories as well, both seats that the NDP very well could win if the cards fall in the right place, of course. And I'm just sort of essentially asking, do you feel like the Liberals are essentially vulnerable in some of these areas, and are you just, trying to shore up some support there?
Well, there's certainly a dissatisfaction. A lot of Canadians have seen 8 years of Liberals and realized that things have gotten worse. Things when it comes to cost of groceries, prices have gone up. Cost of homes, when it comes to buying a home, renting a home, things have gotten worse, not better. And then they look at any of the measures that provided relief, and it's New Democrats that pushed for them. Any of the measures that actually gave people some help, like doubling the GST rebate, bringing in dental care for kids and soon to be seniors and kids under 18, that these are measures that New Democrats push for. So I feel like there's more and more a growing sentiment that the Liberals are not delivering on what Canadians need, not delivering on what Atlantic Canadians need. And New Democrats have shown that we're the ones really fighting for people and delivering. We've got Conservatives that make noise in the sidelines, but what have they done in 2 minority governments to really give people a break? They can't point to real concrete relief that they provided, or we can't, because we're fighting and working for people. Whether Conservatives are trying to fight to get in power, and the Liberals are trying to stay in power, we're actually trying to deliver real results and make people's lives better. And I think that's going to translate to more and more support. And I think there's going to be a significant number of Liberals that say, there's no point in voting for Liberal anymore. We've got to support those that are actually fighting for us.
Next question comes from David Thurston with the CBC. David, please go ahead.
Hi, Mrs. Singh. Thanks for taking these questions. I just want to ask you a question about housing. We heard from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau yesterday saying that housing is a municipal and provincial responsibility, but the feds also have a role to play. Who do you think is responsible for the housing crisis, and who should be responsible for fixing it?
Well, I tell you what's not going to work to fix this problem: finger pointing. When you've got a federal government that wants to focus on who to blame rather than fixing the problem, that's not going to actually solve what we're going through. We've got to take an approach where clearly everyone's got to be a part of the solution. It is clearly a responsibility for everybody, but we can't ignore the significant levers that the federal government has. The levers are so significant that I would say the federal government has incredible powers to actually solve this problem if they choose to do so. It doesn't help having Conservative premiers that have made matters worse, but it's not worth spending time on finding who to blame. The federal government should step up and do everything in its power to acknowledge, one, we are in a housing crisis. There is a serious vacancy issue. There is simply nothing available to rent. And then the cost of buying a home is out of range for so many people. That's why we're proposing we've got to build more homes. We've got to build a more purpose-built rental, and we've got to really build more non-market housing so that people can actually afford the first place to buy or to rent or to live in. We need a significant investment in building more non-market housing as well.
having covered the NDP for some time, I think it's fair to say that your party has been talking about housing long before others have, consistently. What do you think separates you from the Conservatives that are under Poilievre talking about housing now, and that seems to be their main issue?
Well, we look at the Conservatives and really they're not offering anything meaningful. They're saying that the same thing that got us in this problem, just do more of it to get out of it. And that's not going to work. What we're proposing is a real thoughtful approach. We know we need to build more homes in general, so we've got to do that rapidly. The federal government's got to be involved in that. And the Conservatives are not talking about the federal government really being involved. They're talking about trying to somehow discourage red tape or penalize cities that don't build. What we're talking about is we've got to make federal investments and build more homes. We've got to build more homes privately, but we also have to specifically identify the fact that there's a massive gap in purpose-built rental. We were doing some analysis around countries around the world that have got more affordable housing. And one thing that stuck out in 8 countries in Europe, which we compared to Canada, 20% of their housing market was rentals. In Canada, it's only 4%. So there's a big gap there. On top of that, what makes us different from the Conservatives is we're talking about non-market housing. For a lot of people, whether you've got a good income, whether you've got a lower income, market housing is simply unaffordable. You can't afford the market rents in many communities. You can't afford the market home prices. So we also have to build non-market housing. And that's something that really sets us apart. We're looking at not-for-profit housing. Cooperative housing is a real solution. And it's got to be a part of the mix. When we hear the Conservatives, they're not looking at it in a thoughtful way. They don't have a thoughtful answer that addresses the real problems that we're up against. We're providing that real solution. We also talk about an acquisition fund so that it allows different communities that are losing affordable housing to keep those affordable units either not-for-profit, turn them into cooperatives, own them municipally, own them by the people, but making sure we keep what we have that's affordable and ending rent evictions, which is really kicking a lot of people out of affordable homes.
We have a question from Mickey with the Canadian Press. Mickey, please go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, you alluded that, Liberals in the next election will switch their vote to NDP, especially in some of the Atlantic regions that you had mentioned.
Sorry, my friend, I missed the first part of the question. I think there was a sound gap. You could start over again. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, no, thank you. You alluded in an answer to a previous question that some liberals will switch their vote to the NDP in the next election. But why do you think they will switch their vote when they have personally benefited because of the confidence and supply agreement you do have?
Well, I think when it comes down to it, what people are seeing is that they're not benefiting from the Liberals. They're benefiting from New Democrats forcing the government to act. And some people are saying to us, why go through this, having New Democrats force Liberals elect more New Democrats, and the New Democrats can have more decisions or make more decisions that benefit our lives. And we're seeing more and more that sense of dissatisfaction. People are upset with the Liberals and are not feeling like their needs are being met. And they're seeing us, New Democrats, fight for them, really fight to take on the issues that matter to them. We're the ones championing the fact that people need to be able to afford their groceries and that high grocery prices are something that the federal government has to step up and do something about. We're the ones talking about making sure we tackle the housing crisis with non-market housing. And we're the ones that have delivered the first expansion of our healthcare system in a generation with dental care. So more and more people are seeing that it's actually New Democrats that are making their life better. Why don't we vote for those who are fighting for us? And I think for a long time, Liberals have taken people's vote for granted. Here in Atlantic Canada, they think, well, people just vote for us because that's what they do. And I want to put to Canadians, I want to put to Atlantic Canadians that you deserve someone that's going to fight for you. And we've shown that time and time again throughout the pandemic in this minority government, we're fighting for people and we're delivering real results that make people's lives better.
And then Pierre Poilievre, he has done a tour of Atlantic Canada in recent weeks, and he has said that Atlantic people often get lost in Ottawa. Do you believe in that sentiment?
I think it's true. And I think that Newfoundlanders and Labradorians know very well what it feels to be lost when they were completely ignored under the Harper government and the Harper Conservatives. They remember that very well, the way the Harper government treated Newfoundland and Labrador and the rest of Atlantic Canada. And folks are not going to forget the fact that Pierre Poilievre wasn't just a backbencher, but was a key member of Harper's team. This is a Harper Conservative. And what Harper wanted to do and tried to do was cut pensions, cut EI, cut healthcare. What Newfoundlanders want is the exact opposite. They want an EI system that actually works. They want to see pensions that are strong and allow them to retire with dignity. And they want to see investments in public healthcare. Well, that's the exact opposite of what Conservatives have done in the past and are proposing to do again. So Newfoundlanders and Labradorians don't want another Harper-style government that's going to cut all the things they need. And I put to the people of Newfoundland and Labrador, you need someone that's going to fight for you, that's going to stand up for you. Take on the high cost of groceries, like the price, like the store behind me. Stand up for you and fight to make sure that our healthcare system remains public and we expand it to include medication coverage and dental care. You need a fighter like Mary Shortall, who's going to stand up for workers like she's done her whole life. Not someone that talks the talk, but doesn't walk the walk. That's what you get with New Democrats, someone who's actually going to be there for you and fight for you.
That was our last question. I would like to pass it back to you, Jagmeet, for final remarks before we conclude.
Thanks so much. I'm just really, really honored to be back here in St. John's. Really thankful to the workers and the union leaders behind me, and really thankful again to our candidate, Mary Shortall, just recently nominated for St. John's East. We're looking forward to seeing Mary get elected as the next MP for this riding, someone who's going to fight for the people of St. John East, just like all New Democrats do. We're going to keep on fighting for you. Thanks so much.